Hello, and welcome to this recorded sermon from the Ipswich Methodist Circuit. My name is Steve Mann. I am superintendent of the circuit, as well as having pastoral charge of the churches at Elmset, Bramford, Capel St Mary, Holbrook, Chelmerdiston, and Brantham. And whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from, whenever you're watching it, you're very, very welcome. And today we are looking at those few verses from John 17 as Jesus prays for his disciples, but actually specifically in those verses, prays for us, those disciples who will come after the first disciples and as a result of their teaching. A few years ago, I was introduced to the Christian worship band I Am They. And that was because someone sent me a link to a reworking that they did of the old hymn, The King of Love, My Shepherd Is. And if, as well as watching this sermon, you're following the printed service for this week, and if you followed the link given in the song for given as preparation for worship, then you will already have listened to that song. But that led to a love of their music, and they recorded another two CDs before disbanding in 2022. But you might think that's a strange name for a band, I Am They. But it links back to those verses that we are thinking about from John 17. And here is the official explanation. The name is inspired by John 17, created with the intent to adopt on a personal and individual level. As Jesus prays in this chapter, he consistently refers to his disciples as they. It is important to each band member to be the they that Jesus referred to. And if we remind ourselves of those verses from John 17, Jesus said, "My prayer is not for them alone," in other words, not for his original disciples. "I pray also for those who may believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one, as we are one." Many of us will know what it's like to support a football team and go regularly to watch matches. And there we are bound together with thousands of other supporters, or maybe tens, depending on the level of football that you watch. But how many of those supporters do we know? Maybe just one or two, maybe a handful. But were we to get to know them, we would find that many of them we have little in common with other than the football. Some of them we might intensely dislike if we got to know them. Yet in our love for our team, we are united with them. We are one. And people often refer back to this prayer of Jesus at churches together events, at ecumenical gatherings, when the attention is on church unity. I pray, Father, that they may be one. But what sort of unity is Jesus talking about? You might see it like the football, that in our following of Jesus, then the other bits and pieces of our life and our interests, the things that are important to us, cease to be as important as that one thing that binds us. So, for example, we can be, just as we can be very different to our neighbours at football, so we can be very different as Anglicans or Catholics or Baptists or Methodists or whatever denomination or strain of Christianity you might consider. We can be very different in the ways that we worship, the ways that we do things. And yet we can recognize that our following Jesus transcends all of that. It's the most important thing. But the more I read these verses, the more I think that Jesus is pointing us towards not just that, but something subtly different. He's not praying that we may be connected because of Jesus. He's praying that we will be connected because we are in Jesus and he in us. Listen again to those words. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us. Three stages, three steps to the prayer. First of all, I pray for them, those future disciples, us. I pray for them that they may be one. Then Jesus says to his Father, you and I are one, and I pray that they may be one just like that. And then thirdly, to take away any shadow of doubt, Jesus prays, may they be one in us. Our unity, our connection comes from being one with Jesus and therefore being one with God. You might have wondered why I'm not wearing a clerical shirt today, why I'm wearing a t-shirt. And that's because this is an I am they t-shirt. And just to pull it down a little bit, there's a logo there which tries to represent what the band's name represents. Three intersecting rings. As I am one with Jesus, I am one with God. Everything intersects. So I thought I would wear it as a visual illustration of what I'm talking about. I couldn't think of an appropriate, a bit like the football illustration, which went halfway but not the whole way. I couldn't think of a whole way appropriate illustration other than, of course, the one that Jesus gives of the vine and the branches. Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. But of course, the vine includes the branches as well. And Jesus says, remain in me and you'll be fruitful. But I don't want us to spend all of our time thinking about what it means to be one in that sense, because it is, after all, a mystery. We can keep talking, but we'll never pin it down absolutely. But rather, I want to ask the question, what should that look like to the world? Because Jesus said, may they be one in us, so that the world might know that you sent me. So if Jesus is saying that the reason for our unity with one another and with God is that the world might know God and that God sent us, God sent Jesus, then what should that look like to the world? And I want to pick up on the following verse as well, because in that verse Jesus said, "I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one, just as we are one." And that took me back in my mind to the beginning of John's Gospel. Here we're virtually at the end. Here, all we have ahead of us is the passion narrative, the cross, the resurrection stories. But if we go back to the beginning, to John chapter 1, in fact, the verses I was preaching on when I last recorded this sermon, John there says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." There, John says, we have seen his glory. And here Jesus says, I have given them my glory. So what does that glory look like? Well, I guess there's any number of ways of answering that question. But to pick up on those verses from John 1, John links it to grace and to truth. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Truth and grace, if I can take them in that order. Things that we see very much illustrated in those final chapters that are yet to come in John's Gospel, those chapters that I said, take us through the cross, take us through the resurrection, take us to the end of the Gospel. And truth and grace are surely commodities that are so needed in our world today. The world needs to see them reflected in us as they see Jesus reflected in us. But when Jesus was before Pilate, Jesus said something that prompted Pilate to utter those famous words, "What is truth?" And this is what Jesus said. Jesus said, "The reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." This is the reason I was born and came into the world. If that's the reason that Jesus came into the world, how much more should it be our reason or the reason for our existence to bear witness to the truth? And when Jesus talks about the truth, I don't think he's talking about words. I don't think he's talking about propositions that are right or wrong. He's talking about a person. He's talking about staying close to God. And when we stay close to God, we find in God the truth. And we can seek that guidance and discernment for our lives that helps us to tell in a world of fake news and even when there's real news, people claiming it to be fake news. We can find that discernment and direction that we need. Jesus also said that if we follow his teachings, then we will know the truth, and the truth will set us free. And what else do you say? I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, Jesus could say that because he was one with the Father. So if the Father is truth, then it follows that he can say, I am truth, and I am the way to that truth. But, and this is a thought I leave you to wrestle with because I expect it to be a bit of a bombshell in the moment. If Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and here we are saying, well, we're saying things reflected in that phrase, I am they, but Jesus is praying that we may be one as he and the Father are one, that we may be one with the Father, one with Jesus and one with the Father through Jesus, and he in us, and all those bits that go with the intersecting rings. Then it's equally true to say that I pray that they may be the way and the truth and the life. Not humanly speaking, I could never be the way to the Father, but I can reflect that way if Jesus is living in me and I am one with Jesus. That's the profound truth of what we're saying, that we can take that verse, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And actually, Jesus prays that each one of us as Christians and as Christians as a whole, we may reflect God, the truth in all that we do. That's a challenge, isn't it? But it's a challenge that the world sorely needs to see us take on and truly reflect. And then finally, there is grace, which put as simply as possible, means being given what we don't deserve. And we see that time and time again in in those final verses of John's Gospel. First of all, we see it through the cross, and I don't want to major on the cross except to say it's the supreme illustration of grace. That Jesus takes away, or that God through Jesus takes away our sins, the sins that we can do nothing about ourselves, but we find them forgiven because of what Jesus has done for us. That is grace. but also the working out of that in the last chapter of the gospel, as Jesus reinstates Peter, as he brings him back into fellowship after his three denials, three times lovingly saying to him, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? What did Peter deserve? Well, I suppose you could say that he deserved to be taken at his word. If he said, I'm not one of his disciples, then let him be treated as such. Let him be on the outside rather than on the inside. But grace gives us more than we deserve. And then again, in a different way, earlier that morning before the conversation between Jesus and Peter, the disciples are out fishing. And if you remember, the risen Jesus appears on the shore. And it's one of those nights when they've been out fishing and not caught anything. And Jesus says, put your nets down over there. And the nets are so teeming with fish that they can't haul them back onto the boat. And it's one of those fascinating details that are given there. 153 large fish in the net. But that is grace. You could say it's Jesus showing off, but no, I couldn't possibly say that. But they didn't need that number of fish for their fish breakfast that morning. But God in Jesus consistently gives us more than we could deserve, more than we could expect. That's grace. And that's what God wants us to reflect to the world. His truth, but also his grace as well. That grace that is value added, that gives rather than takes. As I was thinking of a hymn to match with this sermon, I was led to that hymn of Graham Kendrick's, Rejoice, rejoice, Christ is in you, the hope of glory in your heart. And I looked it up, but I was a little unsure of phrases like, Arise, a mighty army, we arise. And now is the time for us to march upon the land. Um, because in recent times, our imagery of, well, I guess it always has been thus. But we've seen in places like Gaza and Ukraine and Syria and Myanmar, and we could go on listing them. We've seen the devastation that an army can wreak and the death and destruction that it can bring. And you might say, well, is that the kind of imagery that we want to be associated with? But then I felt God saying to me, what about if you see yourselves as a different kind of army, almost like an anti-army? An army that is one in my Son, that is called up by him. An army that reflects my glory. An army that, because you are in him and he in me, shows the world what truth looks like and allows that truth to bring freedom and to bring new life. An army that spreads grace everywhere it goes. An army that gives to the world rather than taking. An army that seeks not to destroy its enemies, but to bless them. What an army that would be. And maybe that's the illustration I was looking for earlier on, but couldn't quite lay my hands upon. And my prayer added to that of Jesus is that we might be one in him and so full of grace and truth that that vision of an army like that, an anti-army, if you like, doesn't just become possible, but becomes totally visible to the world. May God bless you until we meet again.